Hello, friends. This is Cindy from the Children's Library at Portland Public Library, and today I'm reading part 4 of Ivy and Bean by Annie Barrows and Sophie Blackall. She did all the illustrations. We are on chapter 7 called Easy Peasy. Now they were ready to begin. Ivy went to the bedroom section of her room and pulled a cardboard box out from under her bed. Then she looked at Bean. "This part is really secret," she said. "I promise I won't tell anyone," said Bean. Ivy opened the box and took out a square thing wrapped in a pink silky cloth. What do you think it will be? It was her spell book. Bean thought that a spell book would be especially mysterious looking, with a magic sign on the cover or something. But this spell book was plain black. It was old, though. Ivy said it was almost 100 years old. The pages were yellowish. "Where'd you get it?" Bean whispered. "My aunt gave it to me," Ivy said. "Is she one?" asked Bean. "She says she isn't," said Ivy, "but I'm not so sure." Ivy flipped through the book for the dancing spell. She read it to herself, and then she whispered it, but so low that Bean couldn't hear. Bean didn't mind. Everyone knew that witches' spells were private. After a few minutes, Ivy said, "Got it. It's a pretty easy spell. The only thing we need is worms." There she is reading, and Bean's kind of peeking over her shoulder. Luckily, there were lots of worms in Bean's backyard, tons, but now they were going to have to sneak into Bean's yard and dig them up without Nancy seeing. But also, luckily, Bean knew how to get into her yard by going through the other backyards on Pancake Court. There was one really gross dog poopy yard, and there was Mrs. Trance, who didn't like kids in her garden, and there was lots of climbing. But aside from that, Bean said, it was easy peasy. Ivy put the big black book in her backpack. Bean tucked the wand into her back pocket. It was still a little drippy, but there was nothing Bean could do about that. Carefully, they tiptoed down the stairs. There they are. There's the wand in her back pocket, but still a little drippy. There's the backpack. Ivy's mother was still working in her office, and they slipped past her door like quiet ants. Soon they were moving quickly toward the back fence. Ivy, Bean saw, did not really know how to climb a fence. She just jumped at it, hoping that she would get to the top. Bean showed her how to find the little holes and bumps that make a ladder. This is their route all through the neighborhoods. You can follow the little dotted line. Look at that. When they got to the top, Bean whispered, "This is Ruby and Trevor's house. They have a good sandbox." The good news was that there was a gate on the other side of Ruby and Trevor's yard. The bad news was that it led to the really gross dog poopy yard. Bean and Ivy walked on tiptoes, but still Ivy stepped in some. Fester, the dog whose poop it was, came out to sniff them. He was a nice dog, and he seemed sorry that his yard was so disgusting. There he is. He's a cute dog, isn't he? Fester. The next fence was low and easy, except that the wand fell out of Bean's pocket and she had to go back and get it. Then came Jake the teenager's house. There was loud music with lots of bad words in it coming from the garage. There was no way Jake the teenager was ever going to hear them walking through his backyard. Mrs. Trance was next. Getting into her yard was no problem. Ivy and Bean climbed over the stone wall and dropped down onto her lawn. Everything in Mrs. Trance's yard was perfectly neat. Her tulips were lined up in rows, her apple tree was tied so that its branches grew flat, her bird bath had no birds in it. "If Mrs. Trance sees us, she's going to be really mad," said Bean. Bean knew this garden. It was very long, and there was no way to go around it. "Is she going to throw rocks at us?" asked Ivy. She looked a little scared. No, she just talks, but it's worse than throwing rocks. Bean sighed. Maybe she's not home. But Mrs. Trance was home. They were halfway across her perfect yard when she came outside. She stood on her patio and glared at them. Bernice, she said in a high voice, come here. Bean took a few steps toward the patio. Closer, please, Bernice. It seems that we need to have another one of our little talks. Ivy came over and stood beside Bean next to the patio. There they are, and there's Mrs. Trance. Who are you? Said Mrs. Trance, frowning at Ivy's white witch face. My name is Ivy, said Ivy. Well, Ivy, children are not allowed in my garden. Maybe you can teach your friend Bernice that. Mrs. Trance gave a short, dry laugh. Because Bernice does not seem to be able to remember it by herself. Do you, Bernice? I remember, Mrs. Trance, but it was just sort of an emergency, said Bean. I'm sorry. Usually, when you say you're sorry, people say something nice back to you. Not Mrs. Trance. She said, I don't think you're sorry, Bernice. If you were sorry, you wouldn't keep coming into my garden when I have asked you not to. Do I need to call your mother again? She smiled in an unfriendly way. Bean heard Ivy sucking in her breath. She's about to do something, thought Bean. I'm going to throw up, Ivy said loudly. Yuck, thought Bean, whirling around to see. Ivy looked at her and crossed one eye a tiny bit. Bean looked closely at Ivy. Then she said, That's the emergency I was telling you about, Mrs. Trance. Mrs. Trance looked worried. Ivy burped. Burp. It sounded horrible. Mrs. Trance jumped back. Go home, run! Here's the picture of Ivy hamming it up. That's what we were trying to do, Mrs. Trance, Bean said sweetly. She was having a good time watching Mrs. Trance's face. Go now, yelled Mrs. Trance. Ivy gagged. Blah! Mrs. Trance ran inside her house and looked at them through a window. She waggled her hand at them to shoo them away. We'll be going now, Mrs. Trance called Bean. She waved goodbye as she and Ivy walked away. Ivy gave one more disgusting burp, just for fun. Bean tried to hold her laughs in, but they came out her nose, and then Ivy couldn't hold her laughs in either. It was a good thing they were in the next yard by then. It really was easy peasy after that. They went across Kalia's yard. Kalia was in her high chair at the kitchen window. She waved her spoon at Bean. Bean waved back and then put her finger to her lips. Shh, she whispered. Finally, they came to Bean's own yard. And the next time I read, I will read Bean's Backyard, and I'll give you a little taster of what they were going to do. So that was the next chapter, and next time I will read another part to you. Thanks for listening, friends. Cindy at the Portland Public Library. Have a great day.